Good evening, and welcome to Sleepy Historian, where the past unfolds at its own patient pace, one quiet moment after another. Tonight, as the day settles behind you and the sounds around you begin to soften, we are going to leave behind the speed of the modern world. There will be no hurried deadlines, no glowing screens asking for your attention every few moments, and no trains or engines carrying us across the landscape in a matter of hours. Instead, you will step into a medieval town, where almost everything moves as slowly as the changing seasons. And before we begin, there is something quietly surprising you should know. Many people imagine medieval merchants as restless travelers, forever crossing mountains, sailing dangerous seas, or bargaining for rare treasures in distant marketplaces. But the greater part of their lives was not spent in motion. It was spent waiting for roads to dry, waiting for customers to arrive, waiting for news, waiting for the right season. And by the end of tonight's journey, you may find yourself looking at patience in a very different way. Before we continue, make yourself comfortable. Adjust your blanket if you need to. Let your shoulders become a little lighter than they were a moment ago. If these quiet journeys through history help you unwind at the end of the day, you are always welcome to return to Sleepy Historian whenever another forgotten corner of the past is waiting to be explored. There is always another quiet story waiting patiently for us. Now, there is something about medieval merchants that many people never imagine. Popular stories often picture them as fearless adventurers, endlessly sailing across dangerous seas or riding proudly through distant kingdoms with wagons full of glittering treasures. It is an appealing picture, filled with movement and discovery. Yet for most merchants, that was only a tiny fragment of the truth. The greater part of a merchant's life was spent waiting for the morning mist to lift from the roads before the horses could safely travel, waiting for rain to stop turning a familiar path into deep mud, waiting for a ferryman to guide passengers across a river that refused to become calm, waiting for customers who might buy nothing at all, waiting for a debtor who promised to return after harvest, waiting for daylight, because business could not continue once darkness settled over the marketplace. In many ways, a merchant's greatest skill was not bargaining, it was patience. Tonight you will discover that a successful medieval merchant often lived according to rhythms that barely changed from one week to the next. There were seasons of travel and seasons of staying close to home. There were busy market days followed by long afternoons with almost no customers. There were journeys that lasted many weeks, only to earn modest profits after every expense had been counted. It was rarely glamorous. It was almost never fast. And yet these ordinary people quietly connected villages, towns, castles, monasteries, and distant cities. They carried salt to places where it was scarce, wool to workshops where it would become warm clothing, candles that lit winter evenings, spices that transformed simple meals, and carefully woven cloth that represented months of another family's work. Without great speeches or celebrated victories, they stitched together much of medieval Europe through countless small exchanges. And as we travel beside them tonight, you may discover one small part of a merchant's daily routine that feels surprisingly familiar. If one quietly stays with you, keep it in mind as our journey continues. As the night grows quieter around you, imagine that you have become one of them. Not a wealthy lord dressed in embroidered silk, not a famous knight returning from battle, not even the owner of a magnificent trading fleet. You are simply a merchant whose life is measured in familiar roads, worn boots, careful conversations, and the steady weight of responsibility. Your morning begins long before the sun. The town still sleeps beneath a pale sky. Only a few windows glow with candlelight, and somewhere in the distance a baker has already begun preparing bread that will not leave the oven for another hour. The air carries the cool dampness of stone walls that held the night's chill. Every breath forms a faint cloud before disappearing into the darkness. You rise because trade begins early. There is little comfort in remaining beneath warm blankets when customers may arrive before breakfast. The market rewards those who are prepared before everyone else. Delay too long, and another merchant may make the sale that could have been yours. You pull on familiar clothing, worn smooth by years of use rather than decorated for appearance. Thick wool keeps away the morning cold, Leather shoes have already been repaired several times. Your belt supports a small pouch containing a few carefully counted coins. Never enough to waste, always enough to matter. Outside, the streets remain quiet. The town is smaller than many people today might imagine. Most buildings stand close together, their upper floors leaning slightly toward one another as though sharing whispered conversations across the narrow street below. Wooden shutters remain closed. Smoke rises gently from a handful of chimneys, carrying the comforting scent of burning oak. Nothing feels hurried. Even work begins slowly. You know the route to your shop so well that your feet could almost find it without your eyes. Every uneven stone has become familiar over countless mornings. Every doorway belongs to someone whose face you recognize. The blacksmith, the cooper, the tanner, the baker, the priest, the widow who sells herbs near the church gate. Their lives overlap with yours again and again until every season feels connected to the last. When you finally reach your shop, the first task is not selling. It is preparing. Wooden shutters are unlatched and folded open with quiet effort. Dust gathered during the night is brushed away. Shelves are checked. Cloth is unfolded carefully, so wrinkles do not discourage buyers. Small scales are balanced. Weights are inspected. Every object has its proper place, because confusion wastes precious time later in the day. No customer notices these small routines, but every customer benefits from them. You have learned that successful trade depends less upon dramatic negotiations than upon ordinary habits repeated faithfully every morning. Some mornings very few people arrive. Perhaps heavy rain keeps farmers in their villages. Perhaps harvest demands every available pair of hands. Perhaps a local festival has drawn people elsewhere. The quiet hours stretch gently before you. You wait. Waiting becomes part of your profession, almost as natural as breathing. At first, new apprentices find it uncomfortable. They glance toward the empty street every few moments, hoping someone will appear. Experienced merchants behave differently. They repair a strap, recount inventory, polish brass weights, mend worn sacks, or quietly calculate next month's purchases. Stillness becomes useful. There is always another small task. As the sun slowly climbs, the town awakens in careful stages. A cart rolls over uneven stones with a slow wooden creak. Chickens wander across narrow lanes without urgency. Children carry buckets toward the public well. Somewhere nearby, a church bell announces another passing hour, though time itself seems reluctant to hurry. You begin recognizing footsteps before faces. The farmer who always buys rope after selling grain. The monastery servant searching for lamp oil. The woman who purchases just enough salt for the coming week. The carpenter needing iron nails. Each customer arrives carrying not only coins but also familiar routines. Their needs rarely surprise you. Their lives follow patterns just as your own does. Business is built upon memory. You remember which family prefers coarse wool instead of fine cloth because they work outdoors throughout the winter. You remember who settles every debt exactly on time, and who politely asks for another week. You remember whose children have grown tall enough to require larger shoes before they themselves mention it. Little by little, trust accumulates, not through contracts filled with signatures, not through loud promises, but through years of quiet reliability. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise waiting for us tonight. The medieval merchant does not conquer the world. The world slowly comes to know him. Road by road, season by season, customer by customer. His wealth, if it arrives at all, grows almost invisibly. A better wagon purchased after many profitable years. A stronger roof replacing one damaged by winter storms. A second apprentice joining the household. A daughter receiving a carefully prepared dowry. Small improvements, each one earned through thousands of ordinary decisions that seemed almost insignificant when they were made. There are disappointments as well. A shipment arrives late because swollen rivers prevent crossing. A trusted mule grows too old for another journey. A barrel leaks during transport. A harvest fails, leaving fewer customers able to spend their coins. These setbacks rarely announce themselves dramatically. Instead, they quietly reduce expectations. Plans are adjusted. Purchases are delayed. Repairs are made instead of replacements. Life continues, just a little more carefully than before. As you settle deeper into this quiet world, you may begin noticing something unusual. The merchant rarely remembers life by exact dates. Instead, memories gather around journeys. The spring when the bridge collapsed, the autumn when wool prices remained unusually high, the winter when snow lingered until nearly Easter, the summer when a familiar customer never returned because age had finally claimed him. Years become collections of roads traveled, faces remembered, and markets visited again and again, until each destination feels almost like another home. Tonight you will walk those roads at an unhurried pace. You will stand beside market stalls while the morning slowly unfolds. You will feel cold air before sunrise, warm sunlight across wooden counters at midday, and the gentle ache of tired feet after another ordinary day of honest work. You will discover that history is often shaped not only by kings and battles, but by quiet people whose greatest achievements were measured in patience, trust, and the willingness to rise before dawn once more. So without rushing, let us begin at the beginning, where every merchant once started, not with riches but with the humble lessons of an apprentice, learning that the smallest habits often become the strongest foundations for an entire lifetime. The first lesson you learn as a merchant's apprentice is not how to earn money. It is how to arrive before everyone else. The town is still wrapped in darkness when your day begins. A single candle burns inside the house, throwing long shadows across rough wooden beams, blackened by years of smoke. Outside, the world is almost silent. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster has mistaken the fading stars for dawn, while the slow dripping of last night's rain continues from the edge of a roof onto worn cobblestones below. You are still young, perhaps no older than 12 or 13, though exact birthdays are rarely celebrated in the way they might be centuries later. Childhood slips quietly into responsibility. One season you are carrying kindling for the fire. The next you are trusted with bundles of cloth worth more than your family's yearly income. There is no grand ceremony announcing that change. One morning you are simply expected to know what needs doing. You dress in wool that feels slightly coarse against your skin. It has been patched so many times that each repair tells a small story of careful thrift. New clothing is expensive. Good clothing is expected to last for years, sometimes passed from one child to another until even the strongest stitching begins to surrender. The house itself is modest but orderly. Every object has earned its place through usefulness rather than decoration. A sturdy table bears the marks of countless meals and countless accounts scratched upon wax tablets. Shelves hold pottery, wooden bowls, folded linen, and carefully wrapped bundles waiting for the next market day. Even before breakfast, work has already begun. The merchant, your master, says very little. He does not need to. His routine has become so familiar that words would only slow it down. He checks a leather purse containing yesterday's coins. He adjusts a belt worn smooth through decades of use. He lifts a folded piece of cloth, feeling its weight with practiced hands, before setting it back exactly where it belongs. You watch every movement. No one tells you to. Observation is simply part of becoming useful. Soon the two of you step into the cool morning air. The streets remain mostly empty except for a few other early workers beginning their own quiet routines. The baker's apprentice carries sacks of flour. A woman walks toward the public well with empty buckets balanced across a wooden yoke. A stable boy leads a patient horse toward fresh water. Everyone moves without haste. The day is long enough that there is little reason to rush its beginning. When you reach the shop, your first responsibility is sweeping the floor. Dust gathers even when the doors remain closed. Tiny threads from folded wool drift through the air. Bits of straw cling to boots. Small grains of dirt arrive on every customer who enters. By evening, the floor will once again need attention. Tomorrow, you will sweep it again. This repetition might seem ordinary. In truth, nearly everything about medieval commerce depends upon repetition. The shelves must always appear tidy. The scales must always remain balanced. The doorway must remain welcoming. A merchant whose shop appears careless invites doubt before a single word has been spoken. After sweeping comes another lesson. You begin learning the weights. At first they all appear almost identical. Small blocks of metal, carefully shaped and surprisingly heavy for their size. Yet each represents a measurement that customers trust. A mistake of only a little can become an argument. Several mistakes become a damaged reputation. So you practice, again and again. Your fingers slowly memorize each weight before your eyes do. The smallest rests lightly in your palm. The largest requires both hands. Eventually you no longer need to think before choosing the correct one. Knowledge settles quietly into habit. Throughout the morning you continue arranging merchandise. Rolls of cloth stand upright along one wall, each protected from dampness. Leather straps hang neatly beside bundles of rope. Small sacks of salt remain tightly tied because moisture is always waiting for an opportunity to spoil valuable goods. The merchant explains very little directly. Instead, he asks simple questions. Why should this barrel stay away from the doorway? You hesitate before answering. So the rain cannot reach it. He nods only once. No praise, no criticism, only another question. And why should the cloth stay above the floor? So mice cannot damage it. Again, a quiet nod. You begin realizing that every object has its reason for standing where it does. Nothing is accidental. As customers slowly begin arriving, another lesson unfolds. You are not expected to speak very much. Listening is far more valuable. An elderly farmer enters searching for iron tools. Before he even reaches the counter, the merchant already knows approximately what he needs. Harvest is approaching. Broken tools must be replaced before the fields demand every available hour. The conversation is brief, respectful, unhurried. Neither man interrupts the other. Coins change hands. The farmer leaves. Only after the door closes does your master quietly explain why the sale succeeded. He knew I remembered him. At first the answer seems incomplete. Later, you understand. People return to places where they feel recognized. As the hours pass, you discover that memory may be a merchant's greatest possession. You begin remembering faces. The woman whose husband repairs wagons. The shepherd who always arrives smelling faintly of damp wool. The monastery cook who purchases honey before important feast days. The carpenter who carefully counts every coin twice before spending it. None of these details are written down. They simply remain inside the merchant's mind until needed. By midday, the market outside has become comfortably busy. Voices drift through the open shutters without ever becoming overwhelming. Wooden wheels creak across uneven stones. Horses snort softly while waiting beside carts. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rises and falls with slow, familiar rhythm, neither hurried nor loud enough to disturb the steady pace of trade. Sunlight now reaches farther into the shop, revealing tiny particles of dust floating almost lazily through warm beams of light. You pause for a simple meal. Dark bread, a piece of cheese, perhaps an onion, sometimes dried apples if the previous harvest was generous. No one stops working for very long. The merchant eats while checking inventory. You eat while folding cloth. Even rest serves another purpose. As afternoon settles over the town, fewer customers arrive. This is when quieter lessons begin. Your master unlocks a chest containing several imported goods, a small pouch of pepper, carefully folded linen, fine wool from distant regions. Each item has traveled much farther than most people ever will. You are allowed to touch them only after washing your hands, not because they are magical, because they are valuable. He tells you where each came from, tracing invisible roads across the table with one weathered finger. Some journeys lasted weeks, others lasted months. The merchant himself has never visited every place where these goods originated. Trade passes through many hands before finally reaching yours. You begin understanding something remarkable. The shop may appear small, yet the world quietly enters through its doorway every single week. The scent of distant forests clings to timber. Salt carries memories of coastal shores. Soft wool reminds someone of hills where unseen shepherds watched beneath changing skies. Without leaving town, you encounter fragments of places beyond the horizon. Later in the afternoon, another customer arrives with no intention of buying anything today. Instead, he asks whether payment can wait until next month. The merchant listens without annoyance. Questions are asked. Harvest prospects are discussed. A promise is made. The goods are handed over. No written contract changes hands. Only trust. After the man leaves, curiosity finally overcomes your silence. What if he never comes back? The merchant smiles very slightly. It happens. And then, most return, that answer stays with you, not because it removes uncertainty, because it accepts uncertainty as ordinary. Trade is never perfectly certain. Roads wash away. Harvests fail. Illness appears without warning. Some debts disappear forever. Yet commerce continues because enough people keep their promises, often enough. Toward evening, the pace slows once again. Long shadows stretch across the marketplace. Farmers begin loading empty carts. Children carry forgotten baskets home. The church bell echoes gently through cooling air. You help close the shutters one by one. Each wooden panel swings inward with familiar weight. Candles are lit as daylight gradually withdraws. The merchant counts the day's coins, not triumphantly, simply carefully. Some will pay suppliers. Some must be saved for future purchases. Very little belongs entirely to him. Money is always preparing for its next journey. Before leaving, you sweep the floor once more. The same floor you cleaned before sunrise. The same shelves. The same scales. The same doorway. At first it seems as though almost nothing has changed. Yet when you think more carefully, everything is changed by a small amount. A few bolts of cloth have found new owners. Several new debts have been recorded in memory. A handful of coins has taken the place of merchandise. Another day's experience has quietly settled into your own growing understanding. No dramatic victory has occurred. No great fortune has appeared. Instead, something steadier has begun. You are learning that the life of a medieval merchant is built not from extraordinary moments but from thousands of ordinary ones, each almost too small to notice on its own. Together they form a rhythm that repeats through weeks, seasons, and years, until patience itself becomes the most valuable skill you possess. The morning begins with the same familiar sounds that greeted you yesterday, and the day before that, though you are beginning to notice that no two mornings are ever completely alike. The church bell rings at nearly the same hour. The baker still lights his ovens before the first hint of sunrise, and the cool air continues to carry the smell of damp earth mixed with wood smoke. Yet each new day brings its own small differences, the sort that only someone who lives by careful observation would ever notice. A breeze from the north makes the morning feel sharper than it did last week. The cobblestones remain dry after several clear nights. The sky promises fair weather. For a merchant, these tiny observations matter more than they might seem. Good weather means more travelers. More travelers mean more customers. More customers may mean a better day of trade, though experience has already taught you never to expect too much from any single market day. Hope, like profit, is measured carefully. You arrive at the shop before the streets have fully awakened. The wooden shutters creak softly as they swing outward, revealing shelves that waited patiently through the night. Before anything else, you stand quietly in the doorway for a moment, allowing the cool morning air to drift through the room. Fresh air pushes away the lingering scent of yesterday's candles. It also reminds you that another day has begun. Opening a medieval shop is never as simple as unlocking a door. Every item must be checked. Bundles of cloth are lifted, unfolded, then folded again with patient hands. The edges must appear neat. Customers may judge quality before they ever touch the fabric themselves. A wrinkle is only a wrinkle, but it may suggest carelessness where none truly exists. The barrels are inspected next. One contains salt brought from distant coastal works. Another holds dried beans that will last through the coming months if they remain dry. Smaller containers hold herbs whose scents quietly mingle together whenever their lids are opened. Nothing can be allowed to spoil. Spoiled goods represent more than lost merchandise. They represent weeks of work that can never be recovered. You carefully inspect the balance scales, lifting each arm gently before placing the familiar iron weights beside them. The polished metal catches the growing light, reflecting it in small flashes across the wooden counter. You have repeated this task enough times that your hands move almost without thought. There is comfort in that. Routine frees the mind to notice other things. As the town slowly wakes, more sounds begin drifting through the open doorway. The distant rhythm of horseshoes against stone, a cartwheel complaining with every turn, the quiet conversation of two women carrying baskets toward the marketplace. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once before deciding that the morning is too peaceful to continue. The merchant notices these sounds without appearing distracted. He has learned that they tell stories. The steady arrival of carts suggests farmers have brought fresh produce. The absence of travelers may mean poor road conditions beyond the town. Every sound becomes another small piece of information. Soon the first customer arrives. It is not someone searching for expensive imported goods or rare spices. Instead, an elderly woman enters looking for lamp oil. She greets the merchant by name. He greets her just as warmly. Neither appears surprised to see the other. Their conversation begins not with business, but with ordinary questions. How is your grandson? Did your roof survive last week's rain? Has your neighbor recovered from his illness? Only after these simple exchanges does the oil change hands. Watching this, you slowly understand another lesson. People rarely come only to purchase something. They come because the shop has become part of the rhythm of their lives. It is a place where familiar faces can be found, where ordinary news is exchanged, where worries are shared quietly before returning home. Commerce is woven together with community so completely that separating the two becomes impossible. Throughout the morning the pace gradually increases. A shepherd purchases rope. A carpenter needs iron nails. A cook buys salt and dried herbs. A young mother asks to examine several pieces of wool before choosing enough to make warm clothing for her children before winter arrives. Each transaction follows its own quiet rhythm. Goods are examined. Questions are asked. Prices are discussed respectfully. Coins are counted. Sometimes payment is made immediately. Sometimes another name is added to the merchant's memory until harvest or market day provides the means to settle the debt. You notice that bargaining is nothing like the dramatic scenes described by wandering storytellers. There are no shouted arguments, no theatrical gestures. Most negotiations sound remarkably calm. Both buyer and seller understand that they may meet again next week, next month, or perhaps for many years to come. There is little value in winning today's discussion if it costs tomorrow's trust. As the sun climbs higher, beams of light begin stretching farther across the shop floor. The warmth encourages more people to venture outdoors. Children run across the marketplace chasing one another between market stalls before being gently called back by watchful parents. Farmers wipe dust from their boots before entering. A monk pauses briefly in the doorway, carefully studying several candles before making his selection. You begin recognizing not only faces but habits. Some customers always examine every piece of cloth before making a decision. Others already know exactly what they need before stepping inside. One elderly man counts his coins 3 separate times, even though he has never once made a mistake. Another always pauses to admire the scales, though he has no intention of buying them. These tiny rituals become strangely comforting. Their predictability makes the marketplace feel less like a place of constant uncertainty and more like a familiar conversation that resumes each morning. Around midday, the streets become their busiest. Voices drift together into a steady murmur that never quite becomes noise. Merchants call greetings rather than advertisements. Laughter rises now and then, before fading once more into ordinary conversation. The smell of fresh bread mingles with roasting onions from a nearby cookshop. Somewhere beyond the market square, a cooper shapes another barrel, each strike of his hammer arriving with patient regularity. Time passes differently here. No one glances toward a clock. Instead, people measure the day by sunlight, by hunger, by the changing angle of shadows across the square, by the ringing of church bells. You stop briefly to eat. Your meal is simple, bread baked that very morning, a slice of cheese, perhaps a handful of dry berries if supplies allow. You eat standing beside the counter while quietly watching people continue their errands. Even this short pause teaches another lesson. A merchant is always observing. You notice a traveler studying the town as though seeing it for the first time. His boots carry dried mud from roads beyond your own region. His cloak bears dust of a different color than the earth surrounding your town. He speaks with an unfamiliar accent. The merchant welcomes him politely. Soon they are discussing cloth prices in another city many days away. You listen carefully. These conversations are valuable. Road conditions, bridge repairs, harvest reports, rumors of increased demand. News travels with merchants almost as reliably as goods themselves. Every traveler carries invisible cargo. Information. Sometimes it proves more valuable than anything packed inside a wagon. The afternoon unfolds gently. Sunlight softens. The busiest hours begin slipping away. Customers become fewer, though those who arrive often linger longer. Without the pressure of waiting lines, conversations become slower. An elderly farmer recalls a market held decades earlier when heavy snow delayed spring planting. Another customer remembers the year a bridge washed away, forcing every merchant to travel nearly 2 extra days before reaching the nearest fair. Stories pass from one person to another almost casually. You realize that history survives not only in books copied by monks, it also survives in ordinary memories shared across wooden counters. As the shadows lengthen, your attention turns toward the shelves once more. Several bolts of cloth must be rearranged. A nearly empty barrel should be moved closer to the front. The remaining candles are counted carefully. Inventory is never truly finished. Each sale changes something. Each purchase creates another task. The work continues quietly beneath the surface of every successful day. The merchant never complains about this. He simply accepts it. You begin to do the same. Outside, the marketplace slowly exhales. Farmers load unsold goods back onto wagons. Children disappear toward home. The baker's shelves grow emptier. A pair of crows hop confidently across the square searching for forgotten crumbs. Even the horses seem relieved to rest after standing patiently through the day. Inside the shop you begin closing the shutters. One by one they fold inward, dimming the evening light until only candles remain. The familiar glow softens every edge inside the room. Wood appears warmer. Brass scales reflect tiny circles of firelight. Long shadows settle quietly across the floor you swept only hours earlier. The merchant counts the day's earnings with the same careful attention he gives every evening. Not quickly, not slowly, simply accurately. Each coin represents trust that has been earned. Each coin also carries responsibility. Tomorrow some will purchase fresh supplies. Others will pay transport costs. A few may remain tucked safely away against future uncertainty. Very little money ever sits idle for long. Trade depends upon movement. As you prepare to leave, you glance once more around the quiet shop. It looks almost exactly as it did when the morning began. And yet it somehow feels different. The shelves tell a slightly different story. Some goods have departed. Others wait for new owners tomorrow. The day itself leaves no visible mark upon the walls. Instead, it settles quietly inside your memory. Another ordinary morning. Another ordinary afternoon. Another ordinary afternoon. Together they are teaching you that the life of a medieval merchant is not shaped by rare moments of excitement, but by the faithful repetition of simple tasks, performed with care until they become almost as natural as breathing itself. By now the marketplace has begun to feel less like a place and more like a living clock. There are no hands sweeping across a painted face, no ticking gears hidden inside polished brass, and certainly no pocket watch resting inside your clothing. Those inventions belong to another age. Here, time is measured differently. It announces itself through bells, through sunlight, through familiar footsteps, and through the slow arrival of people whose daily routines rarely change. Long before you learn to predict the hour, you learn to predict the people. The baker finishes selling his warm loaves shortly after sunrise. Farmers appear once the morning dew has begun to disappear from the fields. Craftsmen often arrive later, after spending the first hours of daylight at their own workshops. Toward evening, travelers who have spent the day upon the road finally pass through the town gates, hoping to secure food, shelter, and perhaps 1 or 2 supplies before darkness settles across the countryside. Without realizing it, You begin measuring time by them. If the shepherd has not yet appeared, it must still be early. If the monastery servant has already collected lamp oil, midday cannot be far away. If the children are chasing each other across the square while their parents finish shopping, afternoon has quietly arrived. The marketplace keeps its own calendar as well. Spring feels different from summer. Summer differs from autumn. Autumn slowly gives way to winter, when fewer wagons arrive and fewer coins change hands. You notice these changes not because someone points them out, but because every season alters the rhythm of trade. In spring, the roads are uncertain. Melting snow and steady rain leave deep stretches of mud that cling stubbornly to wagon wheels. Travelers often arrive later than expected, apologizing for roads that seem determined to keep them from their destination. Their boots carry fresh clay into the shop, and before long the floor requires another careful sweeping. No one complains very loudly. The weather has no interest in listening. Instead, everyone adjusts. Patience once again proves more useful than frustration. As summer settles across the land, the mornings arrive earlier. Sunlight reaches the marketplace while cool mist still lingers over nearby fields. Farmers bring vegetables, herbs, eggs, and fresh cheeses. The square fills with gentle conversation before the heat of the afternoon encourages everyone to finish their business and seek shade. The smell of the market changes too. Fresh herbs replace the scent of damp earth. Warm bread mingles with ripening fruit. Bundles of lavender hang beside stalls, filling the air with a quiet sweetness that drifts gently between wooden buildings. You begin realizing that every season has its own fragrance. Every season also has its own sounds. Summer carries bees. Autumn carries wagons loaded with grain. Winter carries little more than footsteps echoing across frozen streets. Autumn is perhaps the busiest time of all. Harvest has filled barns. People possess more grain to sell and, with good fortune, a few more coins to spend. The marketplace grows crowded, not chaotic, simply full. Wagons stand wheel beside wheel. Farmers greet neighbors they have not seen for weeks. Children stare curiously at goods from distant towns. Merchants unfold their finest cloth, hoping sunlight will reveal its quality better than any words ever could. You stand near the doorway watching all of this unfold, gradually understanding that the marketplace belongs to everyone. The blacksmith depends upon the farmer. The farmer depends upon the cooper. The cooper depends upon the carpenter. The carpenter purchases nails from the smith. The merchant quietly connects them all. No single trade stands entirely alone. One purchase often leads to another somewhere else in town. The flow is so gentle that few people stop to notice it. Yet without it, the marketplace would fall silent. The church bell rings. Its familiar sound rolls across rooftops before settling into every corner of the square. Almost no one counts how many times it has rung. They simply know. One bell means one part of the day. Another signals prayer. Another announces evening. Life bends itself naturally around these sounds. You discover that even conversations often pause for a moment while the bell echoes through the air. No one seems impatient. There is no need. The bell has rung every day for longer than anyone can remember. It will almost certainly ring tomorrow as well. There is comfort in that certainty. As your apprenticeship continues, another rhythm becomes familiar. Market days. Not every day attracts the same number of visitors. Certain days draw entire villages toward the town. People begin arriving before sunrise, leading carts pulled by sturdy horses or patient oxen. Some carry sacks of grain. Others bring woven baskets filled with onions, apples, beans, or freshly gathered herbs. A shepherd guides sheep through the streets with quiet whistles that seem almost unnecessary, as though the animals already know where they are expected to go. You watch the square transform. An empty open space becomes a small city of stalls within only a few hours. Canvas awnings stretch overhead. Tables appear. Barrels become seats. Wooden crates become counters. Everything unfolds with practiced efficiency. Most of these merchants have arranged their stalls in nearly the same place for years. Customers know where to find them. Habit saves time. One elderly cloth merchant always arrives before anyone else. His beard has turned almost entirely white, yet he continues lifting heavy bundles with slow determination. Another trader sells nothing but pottery. He greets nearly every passer-by name, though you suspect he sometimes forgets and cleverly hides it behind cheerful conversation. Nearby, a woman offers candles of different sizes, carefully protecting them from the warmth of direct sunlight. Each merchant occupies a familiar place, almost like actors performing roles they have rehearsed for decades. Yet nothing feels artificial. It simply feels settled. You begin recognizing faces from neighboring villages. Some travel several hours just to visit this market, not because it is the largest, not because prices are the lowest, because they trust the people who trade here. Trust travels surprisingly far, farther perhaps than wagons. A stranger may bring fine goods, but familiar honesty often proves even more valuable. Occasionally travelers arrive from towns you have never visited. Their accents sound slightly different. Their clothing carries subtle differences in stitching and color. They speak of bridges under repair, distant fairs, and roads lined with forests rather than open fields. You listen carefully whenever they speak, not out of curiosity alone. Information itself has become another form of merchandise. A report of poor harvests elsewhere may explain why grain prices are rising. News of an upcoming fair encourages merchants to prepare extra supplies. Rumors must always be treated carefully. Facts travel slowly. Stories often travel faster. The experienced merchant learns to separate one from the other without becoming cynical. By late afternoon, sunlight begins changing color. The bright gold of midday softens into deeper amber. Long shadows stretch across the square. The buildings themselves seem taller as darkness slowly gathers behind them. Customers become less hurried. Some remain simply to talk. A farmer discusses the weather. A cooper asks whether timber prices have changed. A traveler shares news of a newly repaired bridge many miles away. Business blends almost seamlessly into conversation. You notice that the merchant rarely ends these conversations quickly. Even when no sale is likely, he listens. Relationships cannot always be measured in coins. Sometimes they grow stronger simply because someone took the time to listen patiently. As evening approaches, market stalls begin disappearing one by one. Canvas is folded. Tables are carried away. Unsold goods return to wagons. The square gradually reveals the familiar stone beneath hundreds of departing footsteps. The transformation is remarkably gentle. No announcement declares the market finished. People simply understand. The light is fading. Tomorrow will come soon enough. You help secure the final items inside the shop. The scales are covered. The remaining cloth is folded carefully. A small wax tablet receives a few quiet notes before being placed safely inside a wooden chest. Outside, the last wagon rolls slowly through the gate. Its wheels produce the same comforting creak you have heard since your first morning here. Perhaps you smile without noticing, because now those sounds belong to your own routine as well. The marketplace has taught you something that few books could ever explain. Time does not always move forward in dramatic leaps. Sometimes it circles gently. Morning follows evening. Spring follows winter. Customers return. Roads are traveled again. The same bell rings, the same shop opens. The same careful work continues. Far from becoming dull, these repeating rhythms give life its quiet strength. Each ordinary day rests upon the one before it, until months become years, and years become an entire lifetime measured not by extraordinary events, but by faithful routines repeated with patience, honesty, and quiet purpose. Tomorrow morning, before the first hint of sunrise, the marketplace will begin breathing once again, and you will already know exactly where your place is within its steady, unhurried rhythm. There comes a morning when the familiar comfort of the shop must be left behind. The shelves have been counted. The barrels have been inspected. The cloth has been folded with unusual care. For several evenings your master has been quietly preparing for a journey, though very little has been said aloud. There is no excitement in his manner, no sense of grand adventure waiting beyond the town gate. Traveling is simply another responsibility, one that arrives as regularly as the changing of the seasons. Today you will travel with him. The preparations begin while darkness still rests over the rooftops. Inside the shop, only 2 candles burn, their small flames reflecting softly from brass weights and polished scales. Their familiar glow makes the room feel warm despite the chill waiting outside. The wagon stands in the courtyard behind the shop. It is neither new nor impressive. Its wooden sides have been repaired many times. Iron bands reinforce places where age has begun to weaken the timber. Every scratch along its frame reminds your master of another journey completed, another muddy road crossed, another market reached before sunset. He runs one hand along its side without saying a word. Perhaps he is checking for loose boards. Perhaps he is simply greeting an old companion. A merchant depends upon his wagon much as a sailor depends upon his ship. It deserves attention before every departure. Loading begins slowly. Nothing is thrown carelessly into place. Each bundle has already been considered long before this morning arrived. Heavy sacks are placed low so they will not shift during rough travel. Fragile pottery is wrapped carefully inside straw before being tucked securely between sturdier cargo. Bolts of cloth are covered with thick canvas to protect them from unexpected rain. You help lift each item into the wagon. At first the arrangement seems almost random, but your master gently moves one bundle only a few inches. Another is turned sideways. A third is shifted toward the rear. Only then does he seem satisfied. Weight must remain balanced. An uneven wagon places unnecessary strain upon horses, wheels, and axles alike. A single careless decision made before sunrise might become a broken wheel many miles from help. These are the sorts of lessons that no customer ever sees, yet they determine whether goods arrive safely at all. You notice that only certain merchandise has been chosen. Many items remain behind. The merchant explains quietly that every journey begins with difficult decisions. A wagon can carry only so much. Every extra pound means greater effort for the horses. Every unnecessary item reduces space for something more valuable. Profit is measured not only by what you sell, it is measured by what you wisely decide not to carry. Fine wool occupies little space while bringing respectable prices. Salt remains valuable almost everywhere, but grows surprisingly heavy when packed in large quantities. Glass must be handled gently. Iron tools weigh more than they appear. Even empty barrels take up room that could carry something else. Each object demands careful thought before earning its place. Nearby, the horses wait patiently. They have sensed that today will not resemble an ordinary morning. Their harnesses lie neatly arranged upon a wooden fence, polished with oil to keep the leather strong, despite years of hard use. You assist while your master checks every buckle and strap. Nothing escapes his attention. A worn stitch, a cracked leather loop, a loose metal ring. Any one of these could fail far from town. Better to discover weakness here than upon an isolated road where repairs become far more difficult. The horses stand quietly throughout the inspection. Steam rises gently from their nostrils into the cold morning air. Their thick coats have grown slightly longer as cooler weather approaches. One stamps a hoof softly against the packed earth before becoming still once more. They are working companions rather than possessions. Without them, the journey simply cannot happen. Before departure, another task remains: food. Not only for yourselves, for the animals as well. A sack of oats is secured beneath the driver's seat. Bundles of hay are tied neatly behind the wagon. Fresh water skins are checked carefully. Bread, cheese, dried apples, smoked fish, and onions are packed into a wooden chest that will travel within easy reach. The meals ahead will not be memorable. They are not meant to be. They are intended to sustain steady work rather than provide comfort. Your master counts them almost unconsciously. Enough for the journey outward, enough for the return. Perhaps a little extra should weather delay your progress. Experience has taught him that roads rarely behave exactly as expected. Inside the shop, one final inspection begins. The shutters are secured. The strongest lock is fastened across the door. A trusted neighbor has agreed to watch the building while you are away. Such arrangements are common. Merchants depend upon one another in quiet ways that rarely appear in written records. Today you leave your shop in another person's care. Months from now, someone else may leave theirs and yours. Trust travels alongside commerce. As the eastern sky begins to brighten, other wagons slowly emerge from neighboring streets. You recognize several familiar faces: a cooper carrying freshly made barrels, a cloth merchant transporting dyed linen, a spice trader with only a few carefully guarded chests. No one plans to travel entirely alone. The roads are safer when shared. Conversation begins quietly while the horses wait. Someone comments on the weather. Another asks about conditions along the northern bridge. A third mentions hearing that a recent fair attracted fewer buyers than expected. No one knows whether the report is accurate. Still, everyone stores the information away. A merchant gathers news almost as carefully as merchandise. The town gate opens with slow, familiar effort. Heavy wooden doors swing outward upon iron hinges that groan softly after another night closed against the darkness. Beyond them lies the road, not smooth, not straight, not certain, simply waiting. Your wagon rolls forward. The familiar streets disappear gradually behind you. The stone buildings become smaller. The church tower still rises above the rooftops for a while before distance slowly hides it beyond gentle hills. There is no dramatic farewell. No crowd gathers to wave goodbye. People continue sweeping doorways, carrying water, feeding animals, and preparing their own ordinary mornings. Life inside the town continues exactly as it should. The merchant expects nothing else. Soon the countryside surrounds you. Fields stretch quietly beneath pale morning light. Some have already been harvested, leaving neat rows of stubble across the earth. Others remain green, promising work that has not yet been completed. Small cottages appear now and then, smoke rising steadily from low chimneys. Dogs announce passing wagons with brief barks before losing interest. Children pause from their chores long enough to watch the travelers pass. Then they return to work. The road itself demands constant attention. Its surface changes almost without warning. Firm earth becomes loose gravel. Gravel gives way to muddy patches hidden beneath shallow puddles. The wagon rocks gently from side to side, nothing alarming. Simply the ordinary movement of medieval travel. You quickly discover that riding inside the wagon is less comfortable than walking beside it. Every rut reminds your back that roads are built by use rather than careful engineering. Your master seems almost unaffected. Years have taught his body to move naturally with every gentle sway. The horses settle into a steady pace that neither exhausts them nor wastes valuable daylight. Speed is never the goal. Steadiness is. A merchant who pushes his animals too hard during the morning may find himself stranded before evening. Patience once again proves more profitable than haste. By late morning the sun has climbed higher. Mist has disappeared from the fields. Birdsong drifts across hedgerows lining the road. The conversation among travelers becomes less frequent. Not because anyone is unfriendly, because every person has settled into the quiet rhythm of the journey. The creak of wooden wheels, the soft jingle of harness fittings, the measured sound of hooves pressing against packed earth. These become the music of the road. Hours pass almost unnoticed. Occasionally another traveler approaches from the opposite direction. Greetings are exchanged politely. Questions follow. How are the roads ahead? Has the river remained low? Any trouble near the old bridge? The answers are usually brief, mostly reassuring, sometimes less so. Even simple conversations carry practical value. A flooded crossing reported by one traveler may save an entire day's delay for another. As midday approaches, your master guides the wagon beneath the broad branches of an ancient oak standing beside the road. Its shade offers relief for both people and horses. Harnesses are loosened. Water is poured into shallow buckets. The horses lower their heads gratefully. You sit upon the grass with your simple meal. Bread tastes no different than it did inside the shop, yet somehow it feels more satisfying beneath the open sky. Perhaps travel changes ordinary things in quiet ways. You look back along the road already traveled. Ahead lies many more miles. There is no impatience, only acceptance. One stretch of road follows another. One careful mile becomes another. The destination will arrive eventually, not because you hurry toward it, but because you continue placing one steady step after another beneath the slow-turning wheels of the merchant's faithful wagon. By the second morning on the road, you begin to understand that travel is less about reaching somewhere than about continuing. Yesterday's destination has already become today's memory. Tomorrow's destination remains somewhere beyond the horizon. Between them lies the road itself, stretching forward with quiet confidence, asking only that you keep moving. You wake before sunrise in the corner of a modest roadside inn. The room is small enough that every sound seems to linger for a moment before fading away. Heavy timber beams cross the low ceiling above you. The walls, built from rough stone, still hold the coolness of the night. A faint smell of smoke drifts upward from the kitchen below, where someone has already begun stirring the morning fire back to life. Your blanket has kept away most of the night's chill, though not all of it. The wooden floor beneath your feet feels cold as you stand. Outside, the courtyard remains almost silent. Only the horses are awake. They shift their weight patiently inside a simple stable, their quiet breathing forming pale clouds in the crisp morning air. They have rested well enough, but today they must once again pull heavy wagons over uncertain ground. Their day begins, as yours does, without complaint. Before anyone thinks about leaving, the animals come first. Your master walks slowly along the stable, greeting each horse with a gentle hand upon its neck. He checks their hooves carefully, brushing away stones and dried mud gathered during yesterday's journey. A small pebble left unnoticed inside a hoof might cause hours of discomfort before evening. Tiny problems grow larger when ignored. You begin noticing how often that lesson repeats itself. The harnesses are lifted into place one careful buckle at a time. Leather straps are adjusted. Iron fittings are inspected. Nothing is rushed simply because the road ahead is long. The merchant has learned that taking 5 extra minutes now may prevent losing 5 difficult hours later. Meanwhile, the innkeeper's wife brings simple bowls of warm porridge accompanied by dark bread, still carrying the comforting warmth of the oven. No one speaks very loudly. Travelers seem to understand one another's need for quiet mornings. A shepherd traveling toward another village nods politely before returning his attention to breakfast. 2 pilgrims quietly discuss the road ahead. A cooper examines one of his wagon wheels while eating, as though work and rest have become impossible to separate. Soon everyone drifts back toward their own responsibilities. The wagons roll forward once more. Morning mist still clings to the low fields surrounding the road. The sun rises slowly behind distant hills, turning the fog into gentle ribbons of gold that drift above streams and meadows. Dew sparkles across tall grass before quietly disappearing beneath the growing warmth of daylight. The countryside seems almost endless. Small farms appear every few miles. Fields divided by hedges. Apple trees bending gently beneath their fruit. Stone cottages standing beside narrow gardens where beans climb wooden poles and chickens wander without any clear destination. Every home seems peaceful from the road. You wonder whether life there feels as calm as it appears. Perhaps it does. Perhaps every household carries its own quiet burdens hidden behind familiar doors. The road bends gradually around a wooded hill. Tall oak and beech trees rise overhead, their branches weaving together until sunlight reaches the ground only in scattered patches. Birds call softly from somewhere above, while fallen leaves rustle beneath the wagon wheels despite there being almost no wind. The forest feels cooler. The air smells different here. Damp earth, moss, old bark softened by countless seasons of rain. Travel through woodland requires a little more attention, not because danger waits behind every tree, as later stories often suggest. Most forests are simply lonely. Fewer travelers pass this way. If a wheel breaks or a horse loses a shoe, help may not arrive for several hours. That possibility encourages careful driving rather than fearful imagination. Your master guides the horses steadily around exposed roots and shallow ruts. Patience once again proves more valuable than speed. By late morning, the road begins descending toward a river. You hear it before you see it. The gentle sound of flowing water grows louder with every step, until the trees finally open onto a broad crossing where a wooden ferry waits beside the bank. Several wagons have already arrived. No one appears annoyed. Everyone understands what comes next. Waiting. The ferryman works with steady confidence. One wagon crosses, then another, then perhaps a pair of riders. The river pays no attention to schedules. It moves only according to its own quiet rhythm. While waiting your turn, people naturally begin talking. A wool merchant mentions that prices were surprisingly strong at the last market. Another traveler has heard that heavy rain farther north has delayed several caravans. An elderly farmer believes this year's barley harvest may be slightly smaller than expected. No one claims complete certainty. Information travels in fragments. Each traveler contributes another small piece. Your master listens more than he speaks. Years have taught him that careful listening often earns better rewards than confident talking. Eventually your wagon rolls carefully onto the ferry. The horses hesitate only briefly before obeying familiar commands. The wooden platform shifts gently beneath their weight. The river carries you slowly across. There is something peaceful about the crossing. The sound of water pressing softly against timber. The distant cry of water birds. Reflections of clouds drifting across the surface with such perfect stillness that sky and river seem almost indistinguishable. No one hurries. No one can. For these few quiet minutes, every traveler simply accepts the pace set by the current. On the opposite bank, the journey begins again. The wheels find solid ground. Harnesses tighten. Hooves resume their measured rhythm. The road continues as though nothing had interrupted it. Around midday, dark clouds gather unexpectedly. They arrive without drama, only a gradual dimming of sunlight. The breeze grows cooler. Leaves begin turning their pale undersides toward the wind. Your master glances upward only once. He says nothing. There is little value in worrying about weather that cannot be changed. Rain begins gently. Large drops fall slowly at first, darkening the dusty road one circle at a time. Soon the steady patter becomes more constant. Canvas coverings are checked. Bundles are secured. Wide-brimmed hats are pulled a little lower. No one stops traveling immediately. Light rain is simply another companion of the road. After an hour, however, the road begins changing beneath the wheels. Dry earth softens. Shallow puddles appear. The horses shorten their stride naturally, choosing safer footing without needing much guidance. The wagon moves more slowly now, not because anyone wishes it, because the road demands it. You begin appreciating something that experienced merchants accepted long ago. Travel is always a conversation with the landscape. Sometimes the road welcomes you. Sometimes it politely asks you to slow down. Ignoring either message rarely ends well. By mid-afternoon the rain passes as quietly as it arrived. Clouds separate. Sunlight returns. Steam rises gently from damp fields. The smell of wet earth fills the air with remarkable freshness. Birds begin singing once more as though nothing unusual had happened. The road slowly dries beneath a strengthening breeze. Even small inconveniences become temporary memories. Late in the day you encounter another caravan traveling in the opposite direction. Their wagons carry barrels carefully covered with waxed cloth. Their horses appear tired but healthy. The merchants greet one another warmly, despite never having met before. Questions come naturally. How was the southern bridge? Busy. And the market? Better than expected. Any trouble ahead? Only muddy roads after yesterday's rain. The conversation lasts barely 2 minutes, yet everyone departs a little wiser than before. This quiet exchange of practical knowledge has likely been repeated thousands of times across medieval roads. No written report could travel as quickly. As evening approaches, the sky begins filling with warm shades of amber and pale rose. Long shadows stretch across fields where farmers finish the last tasks of the day. Smoke rises peacefully from distant cottages. The horses seem to recognize that rest is near. Their pace remains steady but somehow feels lighter. Finally, another roadside inn appears beside a small stream. Its weathered wooden sign sways gently above the entrance. A stable stands nearby. Several wagons already rest within the courtyard. The day's journey has ended. Not dramatically, simply naturally. Harnesses are removed. The horses receive fresh water and hay before anyone thinks about their own supper. The wagon is inspected once again. A loose rope is tightened. Mud is brushed away from the wheels. Tomorrow's work quietly begins before today's has fully ended. After supper, you step outside for a few moments. The road lies silent beneath the fading light. Tomorrow it will carry another procession of merchants, pilgrims, farmers, messengers, and wanderers. Tonight it rests, just as you will. And as you look toward the darkening horizon, you realize that the road itself has become a kind of teacher. It asks for patience without ever speaking. It rewards preparation more often than bravery. It reminds every traveler that reaching a destination is never the work of one great effort, but of countless small, steady miles placed gently behind one another, until, almost without noticing, the journey has quietly become part of who you are. After many days upon the road, you begin to understand that a merchant's journey does not truly begin when the wagon leaves home. It begins much earlier. It begins with decisions made in the quiet hours before sunrise. It begins with conversations remembered from previous markets. It begins with choosing which goods deserve space in a wagon, which roads are worth taking, and which risks are worth accepting. The road itself is only one part of the journey. The destination is another, and somewhere between them lies the most important part of medieval trade, the meeting of people who may have never seen one another before, yet depend upon each other's work. Eventually, after several careful days of travel, the distant shapes of another town appear beyond the fields. At first it is only a suggestion on the horizon. A tower rising above the trees, a thin column of smoke drifting upward, the faint sound of activity carried by the morning wind. Then the road curves, and the town reveals itself more clearly. Stone walls surround parts of it, not because every town is constantly expecting conflict, but because walls have always represented security, identity, and belonging. They mark the boundary between the familiar and the unknown. Beyond those walls are new streets, new faces, new voices, new opportunities. Your master does not become excited, he becomes attentive. A merchant arriving in a new market must observe before acting. Every town has its own rhythm, its own customs, its own preferred prices, its own expectations. A careless traveler assumes every marketplace works the same way. An experienced merchant knows better. Before setting up the stall, your master walks through the market square. You follow quietly behind him. The square is already alive, not loudly, not chaotically, just steadily. A fish seller arranges his morning catch. A baker carries fresh bread from a nearby oven. A craftsman displays small wooden objects polished smooth by patient hands. A woman sells dyed threads arranged in colors that seem almost too bright after days of looking at dusty roads and faded fields. Everywhere people are preparing. The market does not suddenly appear. It grows slowly, piece by piece. A table placed here, a cloth covering stretched there, a basket carried from a nearby street. Within an hour, an empty square becomes a place where hundreds of small decisions meet. Your master chooses a location carefully, not the largest space, not necessarily the busiest. The best place is where the right customers naturally pass. A merchant learns that attention is valuable, but trust is more valuable. A crowded position means little if people do not stop. A familiar location can mean everything if customers already know what to expect. The wagon is opened, the goods are arranged. The transformation is almost surprising. A simple collection of bundles becomes a carefully organized display. Cloth is unfolded so its quality can be seen. Small goods are placed where curious hands can examine them. More expensive items remain protected until serious buyers arrive. Nothing is displayed randomly. Every position tells a story. This is not only a place where goods are exchanged, it is a place where confidence is built. The first customers arrive slowly. A local craftsman examines the cloth. He does not rush. He feels the texture between his fingers. He studies the weave. He asks where it came from. Your master answers simply. No exaggerated claims. No unnecessary promises. A merchant's reputation is too valuable to risk on a single sale. Eventually, a price is agreed upon. The transaction is completed. The cloth changes hands. Coins move in the opposite direction. The moment is small, almost invisible among hundreds of other activities around the square. Yet this small exchange represents a long chain of effort. Someone raised sheep. Someone cleaned and prepared the wool. Someone spun the fibers. Someone dyed the cloth. Someone transported it. Someone dyed the cloth. Someone purchased it. A single piece of fabric carries the work of many people. You begin seeing goods differently. They are no longer just objects. They are journeys. As the day continues, more customers arrive. Some are familiar with your master. Others have never seen him before. Those unfamiliar customers require something different. Trust must be created quickly. They watch how he handles goods. They listen to his answers. They notice whether he treats wealthy customers differently from ordinary ones. Every action communicates something. A merchant is always being judged, even during moments when no one speaks. By midday, the market is crowded. The sounds blend together into a steady wave. Footsteps across stone, voices rising and falling, horses shifting beside carts, coins placed upon wooden counters, the occasional call of a seller announcing available goods. Yet beneath all this movement is a strange sense of order. Everyone understands their role. Everyone follows invisible rules. Do not block another stall. Do not interfere with another merchant's customers. Do not falsely claim the quality of your goods. Do not damage the trust that allows the market to function. Many of these rules exist not because someone constantly enforces them, but because everyone understands that tomorrow's trade depends on today's behavior. A marketplace is a fragile agreement between strangers. It survives because enough people choose cooperation over conflict. During the quieter moment, your master speaks with another merchant. The two men compare experiences. One has recently traveled farther east. Another has spent the season near coastal towns. They discuss prices, roads, weather, and demand. No one treats information as something to give away carelessly. Knowledge has value, yet complete secrecy is impossible. Trade requires communication. A merchant who knows nothing about the world beyond his own street will struggle. A merchant who listens carefully can adapt. You notice that older merchants often speak less than younger ones, not because they know less, because they have learned that many answers reveal themselves if you simply wait. This lesson appears everywhere. On the road, in the shop, in the marketplace. Patience creates understanding. As evening approaches, the market slowly begins to empty. The same transformation happens in reverse. Goods disappear into boxes, tables are folded, cloths are removed. The crowd becomes smaller until only scattered conversations remain. The square returns to stone, but tomorrow it will become alive again. That is the remarkable thing about medieval markets. They are temporary worlds, built and removed repeatedly, created from human effort rather than permanent structures. A marketplace exists because people decide to gather, and when they leave, it survives in memory until the next gathering. After closing your stall, you and your master carry the remaining goods back toward the lodging where you will spend the night. Your arms feel heavier than they did that morning. Your feet carry the dull tiredness that comes from standing for many hours. Travel has its own exhaustion. Trade has another. A merchant must carry both. At supper, conversation continues. Travelers exchange stories. Some speak of successful sales. Others mention disappointing markets. One merchant lost time because a bridge required repairs. Another gained unexpected profit because a certain cloth became fashionable among wealthy customers. Every journey creates a different result. No one can predict everything. That uncertainty is part of the profession. Later, when the candles burn lower, you lie awake for a little while listening to the sounds of the unfamiliar town. Different bells, different footsteps, different voices outside the window. Home feels far away. The shop feels far away. Yet strangely, you also recognize something familiar. Merchants everywhere follow similar rhythms. They wake early. They prepare carefully. They wait patiently. They build relationships slowly. The location changes. The routine remains. And perhaps that is why trade survives across generations. Not because merchants are constantly chasing adventure, but because they are willing to repeat the same careful actions in countless different places. Tomorrow another market will begin, another square will fill, another group of strangers will gather, another exchange will take place between people who may never meet again, and somewhere within that quiet movement, the world will continue connecting itself one small transaction at a time. When you return home after a long trading journey, the first thing you notice is not what has changed, it is what has remained the same. The same narrow streets welcome you. The same familiar rooftops rise above the town walls. The same church bell marks the passing hours. The same shop door waits at the end of the street, holding behind it the familiar smells of cloth, wood, wax, and old stone. Travel may take you hundreds of miles, but returning home reminds you that a merchant's life is built around a constant movement between leaving and returning. The road carries you away. The shop brings you back. Neither can exist without the other. Your wagon enters the courtyard slowly. The horses are tired, not dangerously, simply tired in the ordinary way of creatures that have carried weight over many days of uneven roads. Their shoulders show the effort. Their movements become slower as they approach the familiar stable. Before anything else, they are cared for. The goods can wait. The coins can wait. Even your own meal can wait. A merchant who neglects the animals that carry his livelihood will eventually lose everything those animals make possible. Fresh water is brought. Harnesses are removed. The horses lower their heads, finally free from the weight they have carried since morning. Only after they are comfortable do you begin unloading the wagon. The journey is ended, but the work has not. In many ways, returning home begins another kind of preparation. Every item must be checked. Every piece of merchandise must be counted. Every damaged object must be recorded. Travel leaves small marks behind. A corner of a wooden crate may have cracked. A bundle of cloth may carry dust from the road. A barrel may need repair after being shaken by countless miles of movement. Nothing is ignored. Small problems have a habit of becoming larger ones. The merchant understands this better than anyone. A successful business is rarely protected by one large decision. It is protected by hundreds of small, careful ones. Inside the shop, familiar shelves slowly fill again. Goods that were once packed away now return to their places. The empty spaces created by previous sales begin disappearing. The room gradually becomes what it was before the journey, and yet you notice something different. You are different. Before traveling, these shelves were simply shelves. Now each object seems to carry a memory. The wool reminds you of the distant market where it was purchased. The small metal tools remind you of the craftsman who examined them carefully before agreeing on a price. The imported spices remind you of conversations with merchants whose homes are many days away. The shop is no longer only a place of business. It has become a collection of roads. Every item has a story of movement behind it. After several days of returning to ordinary routines, the rhythm of the shop settles again. The shutters open each morning. Customers arrive. Goods are measured. Coins are counted. The same familiar tasks return. Yet the merchant's work between journeys is just as important as the journeys themselves. A common misunderstanding about medieval trade is that merchants were always moving, always traveling, always searching for the next opportunity. In reality, much of their success depended on what happened during the quiet periods, the days spent at home, the afternoons spent organizing, the evenings spent calculating, the hours spent waiting. A merchant's memory becomes a kind of invisible ledger. He remembers which goods sold quickly, which customers showed interest, which prices changed, which roads proved difficult, which markets seemed promising. Long before modern spreadsheets and detailed records, merchants relied heavily on careful observation. A mistake forgotten today might become an expensive mistake next season, so you learn to pay attention. You watch how much cloth remains after a busy month. You notice which candles are purchased most often during winter. You remember which farmers usually have enough grain to settle debts after harvest. Every detail becomes part of a larger understanding. The shop itself begins to feel like a quiet conversation between past and future. What happened before influences what happens next. The previous journey determines the next one. The previous market shapes the next decision. Nothing exists completely alone. One evening as rain taps softly against the shutters, your master sits at the wooden table with a small collection of coins spread before him. This is not a moment of celebration. There is no dramatic counting of wealth. The process is far more practical. Some coins must pay suppliers, some must repair equipment, some must cover household needs, some must remain available for unexpected problems. A merchant's money rarely stays still. It moves almost as constantly as the goods themselves. You watch as each amount is considered carefully. A few coins saved today may become the difference between continuing and struggling during a difficult season. The merchant is not simply counting what he owns. He is planning what must happen next. This is another quiet burden carried by people who trade. Every decision connects to another. Buying too much may leave money trapped in unsold goods. Buying too little may mean losing customers when demand rises. Traveling too far may create opportunities but also increase costs. Staying too close may provide safety but limit growth. There is rarely a perfect choice. Only choices made with the best information available at the time. The older you become, the more you notice that merchants are not people who eliminate uncertainty. They are people who learn to live alongside it. The weather remains unpredictable. Markets change. Customers surprise you. Roads remain imperfect. The future is always partly hidden. But experience creates a certain calm. The merchant no longer expects every day to be profitable. He no longer believes every journey must succeed. Instead, he understands something simpler. A business survives because good seasons support difficult ones. A successful year may carry the weight of a poor one. A profitable market may balance the disappointment of another. Patience stretches across time. During quieter weeks when customers arrive less frequently, the shop becomes a place of small repairs. Sacks are stitched, wooden boxes are reinforced, tools are cleaned, records are reviewed. The merchant's hands remain busy even when coins are not changing ownership. This is perhaps one of the most important differences between modern ideas of work and medieval ones. There is little separation between preparation and production. Waiting itself becomes a form of labor. Maintaining what you already have is necessary work. Preserving knowledge is necessary work. Keeping relationships strong is necessary work. Many of the things that protect a merchant's future leave no visible mark. No one praises a perfectly balanced account. No one celebrates a wagon wheel that did not break. No one notices a customer who returned because they remembered being treated fairly years earlier. Yet these quiet successes are the foundation of everything. As seasons pass, you begin recognizing the names of other merchants who travel through town. Some appear every spring, some every autumn, some only when conditions are favorable. Their arrival becomes a small event, not because crowds gather, because familiar people returning from distant roads remind everyone that the wider world continues beyond the town walls. A merchant's life exists between two feelings, the comfort of familiarity and the pull of elsewhere. Home provides stability, the road provides opportunity. Too much of one creates limitation, too much of the other creates exhaustion. The merchant must constantly balance both, and perhaps that balance is what defines the profession. Not adventure, not wealth, not constant movement. Balance, knowing when to leave, knowing when to return, knowing when to spend, knowing when to wait, knowing when a quiet day in the shop is just as valuable as a successful journey to a distant market, because in the end, the merchant's greatest achievement is not reaching the farthest place. It is creating a life steady enough to continue, a life built from countless ordinary choices, a life where every morning begins with the same simple question, what must be done today? And then, patiently, one task follows another. There is a certain kind of quiet that belongs only to home. It is not the silence of an empty place. It is the silence of a place that knows you. After weeks upon the road, after sleeping beneath unfamiliar roofs and hearing unfamiliar voices, the sounds of your own town begin to feel almost like a song you had forgotten you knew. The creaking sign above the neighboring workshop, the footsteps of people who have walked the same streets for years, the morning bell that echoes from the church tower, the voices of merchants calling greetings from one doorway to another. Nothing about these sounds is remarkable, and yet, after travel, they carry a strange comfort. The merchant's home is not separate from his work. The two are woven together so closely that separating them would be almost impossible. The shop may occupy the front of the building, but life continues behind it. Meals are prepared near the same walls where goods are sold. Family conversations happen within hearing distance of customers. Children grow up surrounded by the smells and sounds of trade. For a merchant household, business is not something that begins after leaving home. Home is where business lives. The day begins early once again. The shutters open. The floor is swept. The shelves are checked. But now there is another rhythm layered beneath the daily work, the rhythm of recovery. After a journey, the body remembers the road. Your feet still carry the tiredness of many miles. Your shoulders still remember lifting heavy bundles. Your mind still occasionally returns to distant towns and unfamiliar streets. Yet there is comfort in returning to familiar tasks. A person can become tired from constant movement. Even the strongest traveler eventually appreciates the simple act of standing behind a familiar counter. The merchant understands this. He does not immediately plan another journey. He allows time for ordinary life to resume. This does not mean rest without purpose. There are always things requiring attention. The shop must be prepared for the coming weeks. Supplies must be ordered. Customers must be visited. Promises must be remembered. A merchant's reputation does not survive only through selling goods. It survives through maintaining relationships after the sale is complete. One morning, you accompany your master as he walks through the town. He carries no wagon, no bundles, no obvious merchandise. At first you wonder why he is spending time away from the shop when there are tasks waiting. Soon you understand. A merchant's connections are part of his trade. The first stop is at a craftsman's workshop. They discuss future orders. The conversation is simple. No formal meeting. No elaborate agreement. Just two people who have worked together long enough to understand each other's expectations. The craftsman knows the quality of goods your master prefers. Your master knows how much time the craftsman needs to complete his work. Years of cooperation have removed the need for unnecessary explanation. This kind of trust cannot be purchased. It must be built slowly. The next visit is to another merchant. They exchange news. A distant market has become less profitable. A certain type of cloth has become more desirable. A road that was difficult last year has improved after repairs. None of this information seems dramatic, but small pieces of knowledge gathered over many conversations eventually shape important decisions. A merchant who listens carefully gains an advantage not through secrecy but through awareness. The world outside the town is always changing, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, and merchants must change with it. Back at the shop, customers continue arriving. Some are new, many are familiar. A farmer who once purchased a simple tool now brings his grown son. A customer who bought winter cloth years earlier returns for a similar order. The merchant remembers. This ability surprises you more as time passes. How can one person remember so many details? Names, families, purchases, promises, small conversations from years ago. But memory is not merely a skill. It is part of the profession. A merchant's mind becomes filled with countless small threads connecting one person to another. The woman who buys candles every winter. The carpenter who prefers a certain type of iron fitting. The traveler who always arrives from the same southern road. Each person becomes part of a larger pattern. And because the merchant remembers, people feel seen. In a world where travel is difficult and communication is slow, familiarity has great value. A person's reputation can travel farther than their body ever does. A merchant may enter a distant town where no one knows his face, yet someone may recognize his name. He comes from a good family. He keeps his word. He pays what he owes. He treats customers fairly. These simple statements are a form of wealth, perhaps even the most important kind, because coins can disappear. Goods can be lost. But a trusted name can open doors that money alone cannot. Of course, trust does not remove hardship. There are still difficult seasons. A customer may fail to repay a debt. A shipment may arrive damaged. A journey may earn less than expected. The merchant experiences these disappointments without surprise. He has lived long enough to understand that difficulty is part of the pattern. A calm person is not someone who never faces problems. A calm person is someone who has learned that problems eventually become part of the past. During one particularly quiet afternoon, rain falls steadily against the shop shutters. Few customers appear. The street outside becomes nearly empty. Water gathers along the edges of the road. The sky remains gray throughout the day. At first, such weather seems inconvenient, but the merchant simply adjusts. The slower hours are used for other work. Old records are reviewed. Tools are repaired. Future journeys are considered. A young apprentice nearby practices writing numbers carefully onto a wax tablet. The merchant watches quietly. Perhaps he remembers his own first attempts, the same hesitation, the same mistakes, the same slow improvement. Teaching becomes another part of his life, not through grand speeches, through example. You learn by watching him measure carefully. You learn by hearing him speak respectfully. You learn by seeing him remain patient when patience is difficult. The lessons are rarely announced. They simply appear through ordinary moments. A customer arrives angry because a price has changed. The merchant listens before answering. A supplier arrives late. The merchant asks questions before judging. A young worker makes a mistake. The merchant corrects him without humiliation. Over time, these small moments teach more than any written instruction. They reveal that commerce is not only about goods, it is about people. Every transaction contains two sides, something exchanged and something preserved, a relationship, a reputation, a promise that tomorrow's conversation can still happen. As the years pass, the shop becomes almost like a landmark within the town. New buildings appear, old buildings disappear, children become adults, adults become elders. Yet the merchant's doorway remains familiar. People describe directions using it. Turn near the old merchant's shop. Meet me beside the place where the cloth is sold. The shop becomes part of the town's memory, and perhaps that is a merchant's quiet reward. Not fame, not songs, not statues. Simply becoming someone whose presence makes a place feel more familiar. Someone whose daily work becomes part of the background of other people's lives. By evening the rain has stopped. The streets shine beneath the fading light. Water reflects the glow of lamps being lit in nearby homes. Inside the shop, the finny customer leaves. The shutters close. The candle burns lower. Another day disappears almost unnoticed. Nothing extraordinary happened. No fortune was discovered. No distant kingdom was reached. Yet the merchant's life continues to grow stronger through these quiet days. Because stability is not created by one great achievement. It is created by returning again and again to the same responsibilities, opening the shop, greeting the customer, keeping the promise, repairing what is worn, preparing for what comes next. A lifetime is built in this way, not in moments that everyone remembers, but in moments that almost everyone overlooks. Winter arrives slowly. It does not announce itself with a single morning of deep snow or a sudden transformation of the world. Instead, it appears through small changes that become impossible to ignore. The mornings grow darker. The air feels sharper against your face. The wooden shutters remain closed a little longer before the shop opens. Breath becomes visible in the cold street. Water left outside overnight freezes into thin sheets of ice. The rhythm of the merchant's life changes with the season. Not completely. The shop still opens, customers still arrive, goods are still measured and exchanged, but the pace becomes quieter. The roads are less reliable. Travel becomes more difficult. Many merchants who spent the warmer months moving between distant towns now remain closer to home, waiting for the return of gentler weather. Winter is not a pause from work. It is a different kind of work. The shop becomes a place of preparation. The The merchant's attention turns inward. During the busy months, there was little time to examine every detail. There were journeys to complete, customers to serve, goods to transport, and decisions that needed to be made quickly. Winter offers something different. Time. Not unlimited time, but enough time to notice what was overlooked. The first task each morning remains familiar. The shutters are opened, the fire is tended, the shelves are inspected. Yet the cold changes the feeling of everything. The wood beneath your hands feels harder. The metal weights used for measuring goods are cold enough to make your fingers uncomfortable. The floor seems to hold the chill of the night long after the sun is risen. You learn that winter enters every building eventually. No wall completely stops it. No fire completely defeats it. People simply learn how to live alongside it. Inside the shop, warmth becomes something valuable. The small fire near the back of the room is carefully maintained. Fuel must be used wisely. Too much wood burned too quickly means less available later. Too little means uncomfortable working conditions. Even warmth requires planning. The merchant understands this. Almost every part of life requires a careful balance. Winter also changes the customers who arrive. Farmers come less frequently. Their work follows the slower pace of the fields. Travelers appear less often. The roads discourage unnecessary movement. Those who do arrive usually have specific reasons: a broken tool, a necessary supply, a piece of cloth needed before the cold becomes worse. The conversations become longer, perhaps because there is less urgency. Perhaps because winter naturally encourages people to remain near warmth whenever possible. A customer may enter to purchase salt and remain for several minutes discussing the weather. Another may come for repairs and share news from a neighboring village. A traveler delayed by snow may spend an entire evening near the fire before continuing onward. The shop becomes more than a place of trade. It becomes a place where people wait. Waiting has always been part of medieval life. Waiting for seasons. Waiting for harvest. Waiting for roads to improve. Waiting for messages to arrive. Modern people often imagine waiting as lost time, but for the medieval merchant, waiting was simply another condition of existence. It was time that could be used, time to think, time to repair, time to prepare. During winter afternoons, when customers are fewer, you spend hours organizing the shop. Sacks are emptied and cleaned. Cloth is checked for damage. Old tools are repaired. Boxes are strengthened. Everything that will be needed in the coming year receives attention. There is a quiet satisfaction in this work. Nothing dramatic happens. No one celebrates a repaired hinge. No one notices a perfectly organized shelf. But these small efforts protect the future. A merchant's success depends heavily on invisible work. The work done before anyone arrives. The work done when no one is watching. The work that prevents problems instead of solving them afterward. This understanding grows stronger as you become older. At the beginning of your apprenticeship, you thought business happened only when someone bought something. Now you understand that the sale is only one moment in a much longer process. The true work begins before and continues after. A merchant does not simply exchange goods. He maintains a system. During the coldest weeks, the merchant also spends more time reviewing past decisions. Which goods sold quickly? Which remained on the shelves too long? Which journeys were worth repeating? Which roads created unnecessary difficulty? Memory becomes a guide. The past is not forgotten. It becomes information. One evening, as snow begins falling outside, you sit beside the merchant while he examines old notes. The room is quiet except for the soft sound of the fire. Outside, the town has become unusually still. Footsteps are fewer. Voices are quieter. Even the marketplace seems to be resting. The merchant looks through years of records. Not because he enjoys remembering every detail, because every detail has taught him something. A successful merchant does not become successful by never making mistakes. He becomes successful by learning from each one. A poor purchase becomes a lesson. A delayed journey becomes a lesson. A customer lost becomes a lesson. A difficult season becomes a lesson. Experience is built slowly. There is no shortcut. The winter months also bring another important responsibility: planning. Spring will eventually return, roads will open, markets will become active again. But preparation must begin before the first signs of warmer weather. Orders must be considered, travel routes must be discussed, suppliers must be contacted. A merchant who waits until the season begins has already fallen behind. The quiet months are therefore filled with thoughts of the future, not anxious thoughts, practical ones. The same calm attention used for weighing cloth is applied to weighing possibilities. What is needed? What is possible? What is worth attempting? The answers are rarely perfect. They do not need to be. A merchant learns to make decisions with incomplete knowledge. That may be one of the hardest parts of the profession. The future always remains partly hidden. No one knows exactly what the next harvest will bring. No one knows whether a journey will be profitable. No one knows whether weather will cooperate. Yet life continues. People still trade. People still travel. People still make plans. Because uncertainty does not disappear when ignored. It only becomes easier to face when accepted. As winter continues, the days slowly begin to lengthen. At first, the difference is almost impossible to notice. A little more light in the evening, a little less darkness before sunrise, a little warmth returning to the air. The changes are small, but after months of cold, small changes become meaningful. The merchant notices. Everyone notices. The town begins preparing for movement again. Farmers repair tools. Travelers inspect wagons. Merchants consider roads once more. The world slowly begins waking. And you realize that winter itself has been a teacher. It has shown you that trade is not only about movement. Sometimes success comes from staying still, from maintaining what you have, from preparing patiently, from understanding that quiet seasons are not empty seasons. They are the foundation for everything that comes afterward. When spring finally arrives, the merchant will travel again. The roads will open, the markets will fill, the wagons will move. But the journey will be possible because of these cold months spent waiting, repairing, and planning. The world often notices the merchant when he arrives somewhere new. Few people notice the quiet winter evenings that made the journey possible. Yet those evenings contain much of the truth. A merchant's life is not built only on distant places. It is built in small rooms, by candlelight, through careful hands, during ordinary days when nothing remarkable seems to happen. And perhaps that is why the rhythm lasts so long, because it does not depend on excitement. It depends on patience. A merchant's greatest possession is not the goods stored inside the shop. It is not the coins kept safely behind a locked chest. It is not even the wagon that carries valuable merchandise across distant roads. Those things can be replaced. They can be repaired. They can be lost and recovered. But a reputation is different. A reputation takes years to build, and only moments to damage. As your master's hair begins to show more silver and his movements become slightly slower, you notice that people greet him differently than they did when you first entered the shop as an apprentice. The younger merchants still discuss prices. They still compare goods. They still search for opportunities. But many people now come to your master for something beyond merchandise. They come because they trust his judgment. A farmer may ask whether a certain tool is worth repairing or replacing. A younger trader may ask which market is worth visiting during the coming season. A customer may seek advice before spending coins that took months to earn. The merchant has become more than a seller. He has become someone whose experience carries weight. This transformation happens so gradually that it is almost invisible. There is no ceremony, no official moment when the town decides that someone has become respected. Instead, it happens through thousands of small interactions. A fair price offered when a customer could have been overcharged. A debt remembered and handled with patience. A promise kept even when keeping it was inconvenient. A difficult conversation handled without anger. These moments accumulate, one by one, year after year, until eventually people no longer ask whether the merchant can be trusted. They already know. Trust has become part of his name. You begin noticing that older merchants often speak differently from younger ones. When you were first learning the trade, you wanted answers immediately. How much should this cost? Which road should we take? Which good should we buy? Which market should we visit? Experience teaches something more subtle. Often the most valuable answer begins with another question. Who is buying? What season is approaching? What have people needed before? What problems might appear? A merchant learns that trade is not only about seeing what exists today, it is about understanding what may be needed tomorrow. This ability comes slowly. There is no shortcut. No book can completely teach it. A written guide may explain measurements, prices, and methods, but only time teaches a person how to read the expressions of customers, how to recognize hesitation, how to understand when silence means uncertainty and when it means careful consideration. The marketplace itself becomes a teacher. Every person who enters the shop brings another lesson. Every season provides another example. Every mistake leaves behind another piece of knowledge. As the years pass, you find yourself doing things you once watched your master do. You recognize familiar footsteps before the customer enters. You know which questions certain people will ask. You understand when a person is looking for advice rather than simply a product. The habits that once seemed mysterious now feel natural. They have become part of you. One afternoon, a young merchant arrives from a nearby town. He is eager, energetic, full of plans. He speaks quickly about expanding his business, finding new routes, and reaching markets farther away. You listen quietly, because you remember being much like him. The desire to move faster, to achieve more, to discover something beyond the familiar. There is nothing wrong with ambition. Without it, merchants would never travel, markets would never grow, goods would never move between distant places. But experience has taught you that ambition must be guided by patience. A merchant who grows too quickly may become trapped by his own success. More customers require more goods require more money, more journeys require more workers. Every opportunity carries another responsibility. Growth is not simply gaining more, it is carrying more. The young merchant asks your opinion about a possible journey. The road is longer than any he has traveled before. The market is promising. The potential profit is attractive. But the journey will require leaving familiar roads. You consider his question carefully. Then you offer the same kind of answer your own master once gave you. Know the road before you trust the destination. The young merchant smiles, perhaps expecting something more exciting. But years of experience rarely produce exciting answers. They produce careful ones. The road matters. The weather matters. The people you meet matter. A profitable market means little if reaching it costs more than expected. A good opportunity is only good when it fits within reality. This way of thinking separates experienced merchants from those who chase every possibility. The older merchant has learned that not every open door should be entered. Sometimes wisdom is knowing which opportunities to ignore. Inside the shop, daily life continues. The same shelves, the same scales, the same wooden counter. But now younger workers watch you in the same way you once watched your master. They notice how you greet customers, how you arrange goods, how carefully you handle coins. They may not understand the reasons yet. That is how learning often works. First comes imitation, then understanding, then eventually improvement. One evening, as the shop closes, you find yourself standing near the doorway after everyone has left. The street outside is quiet. The last traces of daylight have disappeared. Lanterns glow from nearby homes. The town has changed since your earliest days. Some faces are gone. New faces have appeared. Some buildings have been repaired. Others have been replaced. Yet certain things remain. The market still opens. The bell still rings. The roads still carry travelers. People still need goods. People still depend on trust. You realize that this is the true strength of a merchant's life. Not that everything remains unchanged, but that change itself becomes part of the rhythm. The merchant adapts. The town adapts. The trade continues. A reputation allows this continuity, because people know that even as seasons change and generations pass, certain values remain steady. Fairness, care, reliability, patience. These qualities are not exciting. They do not create dramatic stories. They do not inspire songs from wandering performers, yet they hold together the quiet structure of everyday life. Most people in history are remembered for only a short time. Their names disappear. Their homes disappear. Their possessions disappear. But the effects of their actions continue. A merchant who treated customers honestly may have encouraged others to do the same. A merchant who taught apprentices carefully may have shaped businesses for generations. A merchant who kept roads connected may have helped entire communities survive difficult seasons. Small actions travel farther than the person who performs them. As night settles over the town, you close the shop door one final time for the day. The lock turns. The key feels familiar in your hand. Another day of trade has ended. Tomorrow will bring more customers, more conversations, more decisions. The rhythm continues, and somewhere beyond the town walls, another merchant is likely doing the same thing. Closing a shop, counting coins, preparing for tomorrow, living a life built not from extraordinary moments, but from the quiet accumulation of ordinary ones. Because in the medieval world, the greatest wealth was often not found in a chest of coins. It was found in something far more fragile, a name people trusted. There is a moment in every long working life when the work itself begins to feel larger than the person doing it. The merchant who once carried small bundles through unfamiliar streets eventually becomes part of the landscape around him. The shop becomes familiar. The voice behind the counter becomes familiar. Even the simple movements of opening shutters and arranging goods become something people recognize. Years pass quietly in this way, not with a single great turning point, not with a moment when everything suddenly becomes different. Life rarely announces its changes. Instead, it leaves small signs. A younger person begins handling tasks that once belonged only to you. A customer who used to arrive with a parent now arrives with a child of their own. A familiar road begins to feel shorter because you have traveled it so many times. A once heavy responsibility begins to feel natural. The merchant's life is shaped by repetition, but repetition does not mean emptiness. A person can perform the same action many times and still discover something new within it. The way sunlight enters the shop during winter mornings, the sound of different footsteps outside the door, the changing expressions of customers as they examine goods, the subtle differences between one season and another. Experience sharpens attention. The longer you live within a rhythm, the more details you begin to notice. When you were young, the market seemed like a place of endless movement, a place filled with opportunities waiting to be discovered. Now you see something different. You see patterns. You notice that some customers always buy before winter. You notice that certain goods become more valuable during specific seasons. You notice that people often reveal what they need long before they actually ask for it. A farmer mentioning a poor harvest may eventually need credit. A craftsman speaking about increased orders may soon require additional materials. A traveler asking about prices in another town may be searching for a new opportunity. The merchant listens, not because every conversation leads to profit, but because understanding people is part of understanding trade. A shop is not simply a room where objects are exchanged. It is a place where information gathers. News arrives with customers. Rumors arrive with travelers. Changes in distant places eventually appear through small conversations close to home. The wider world enters through the doorway, sometimes slowly, sometimes incomplete, but always somehow present. This is one of the quiet powers of merchants throughout history. They connected places that might otherwise remain distant. A farmer in one region might use a tool created somewhere far away. A household might use spices that traveled across many lands. A craftsman might purchase materials from someone they would never meet. The merchant stands between these worlds, not as a ruler, not as a soldier, simply as a person carrying things from one place to another. And yet this simple act changes societies. A road becomes more than a road. A market becomes more than a gathering place. A town becomes connected to something much larger. You begin to understand that every journey your master made was part of a much wider movement. Every wagon wheel turning along the road contributed to a constant exchange that stretched across regions. The world was connected long before people could communicate instantly. It was connected by footsteps, by ships, by animals pulling carts, by people willing to spend days or weeks traveling toward uncertain outcomes. The pace was slow, but the movement was constant. One afternoon, while organizing old records, you discover notes from one of your master's earliest journeys. The handwriting is different. The descriptions are shorter. The confidence is not yet fully developed. You can almost see the younger person behind the words. A merchant still learning, still uncertain, still discovering which lessons would matter. The discovery feels strange because the person described in those notes seems different from the one you know. The experienced merchant who now speaks calmly about difficult decisions was once someone who worried about the same things you once worried about. Will customers come? Will the goods sell? Will the journey succeed? Will the money be enough? The difference was not that uncertainty disappeared. The difference was that he learned to carry it. This may be one of the quietest forms of wisdom. Not removing difficulty, not avoiding unknown situations, simply becoming more comfortable moving through them. The merchant's confidence does not come from knowing exactly what will happen. It comes from knowing that whatever happens, he can respond. A broken wheel can be repaired. A poor market can be survived. A difficult season can pass. A mistake can become a lesson. The future remains uncertain, but uncertainty no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes another part of the journey. During the later years, you notice that your master travels less often. The roads have not changed. The markets have not disappeared, but the body eventually begins asking for different things. Long journeys require strength. Cold nights on the road require endurance. Hours on a wagon require patience from the body as much as from the mind. The merchant understands this without bitterness. Every stage of life has its own rhythm. The younger merchant moves outward. The older merchant becomes more rooted. The younger merchant seeks distant opportunities. The older merchant protects the relationships already built. Neither is more valuable. They simply belong to different seasons. Now, instead of traveling himself, your master often prepares others. He checks their wagons. He advises them about routes. He reminds them to carry extra supplies. He tells them not to underestimate simple difficulties. A young traveler may worry about finding customers. The older merchant worries about whether the traveler has enough patience, because he knows the greatest challenges are often not dramatic. They are ordinary. A long wait, a delayed shipment, a customer who changes their mind, a road that takes longer than expected, small difficulties repeated over time. These are the things that test endurance, and these are the things experience teaches people to handle. One evening, a storm arrives. Rain strikes the roof. Wind moves through the narrow streets. The shop remains closed earlier than usual. Inside, the fire burns quietly. The weather outside feels distant. You sit with your master and listen as he speaks about earlier years, not as a storyteller trying to impress, simply as someone remembering. He does not focus on success. He remembers ordinary things. A meal shared beside a road. A stranger who offered directions. A cold night spent waiting for a bridge to reopen. A customer who returned after many years. These small memories remain stronger than the larger events. Perhaps because they were lived slowly. Perhaps because ordinary moments are where most of life actually happens. The merchant's story is not one of constant achievement. It is a story of endurance, of showing up, of maintaining responsibility, of continuing through seasons that are comfortable and seasons that are difficult. The world often notices people when they accomplish something unusual. But most lives are built through things that appear ordinary. Opening the shop, keeping the promise, completing the journey, helping the customer, teaching the next person. These actions rarely become written records. Yet they are the foundation upon which communities continue. As the storm finally passes, the town becomes quiet again. Water drips from rooftops. The streets shine beneath the lantern light. Tomorrow the market will reopen. The roads will fill again. The cycle will continue. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of the medieval merchant's life. Not that trade was easy. Not that every journey succeeded. Not that every journey was correct. but that a meaningful life can be created from steady effort repeated over many years. A person does not need every day to be extraordinary. A person only needs enough patience to continue through ordinary ones, and slowly, almost without noticing, those ordinary days become a lifetime. Eventually, every merchant must face the same truth that every traveler discovers. The road continues even when one person stops walking. The market continues even when one familiar voice no longer calls from a doorway. The shop continues even when the hands that built its reputation can no longer perform every task. This is not a sad truth. It is simply the natural rhythm of things. A merchant's life has always been connected to continuation. Goods move from one person to another. Knowledge moves from one generation to another. Skills move from one pair of hands to another. Nothing truly remains still. It only changes its direction. As the years pass, you begin carrying more responsibility inside the shop. At first, the changes are almost too small to notice. Your master asks you to handle a customer while he finishes another task. Then he allows you to negotiate a small purchase. Then he asks your opinion about a journey that once would have been decided without question. The transition happens quietly. There is no announcement, no formal moment when one person becomes the other. A merchant's knowledge is transferred through trust, through observation, through countless ordinary moments shared beside a wooden counter. You realize that many of the things you once thought were simple habits were actually lessons. The way your master paused before answering a difficult question, the way he inspected every object before buying it, the way he remembered small details about customers, the way he considered consequences before making decisions. None of these actions were random. Each one carried years of experience. And now you find yourself repeating them, not because you are trying to imitate him, because they have become part of how you understand the world. This is how traditions survive. Not through grand speeches, not through perfect instructions, through people quietly passing knowledge onward. A young apprentice watches an older merchant. A child watches a parent. A traveler listens to someone with more experience. A customer remembers being treated fairly and teaches that expectation to others. The lessons move slowly, but they move. The merchant's world is built on this kind of slow movement. A wagon does not cross a kingdom in a single moment. A reputation is not created in a single day. A successful business does not appear suddenly. Everything valuable takes time. This may be difficult for people living in faster ages to understand. The medieval merchant cannot hurry many things. A journey takes the time it takes. A message arrives when a messenger arrives. A harvest grows according to the seasons. A skill develops only through repetition. There is no shortcut around time. And because there is no shortcut, people learn to live with time differently. They learn patience. They learn acceptance. They learn that some things are worth waiting for. One spring morning, years after your first journey, you stand outside the shop before opening. The street is beginning to wake. A baker carries bread through the early light. A craftsman opens his workshop. A farmer guides a cart toward the market. The town moves through its familiar pattern. You notice that you are now one of the familiar parts of that pattern. People greet you in the same way they once greeted your master. They ask your opinion. They trust your judgment. They depend on your reliability. The realization arrives gently, almost unnoticed. You have become the person you once watched from the corner of the shop, the person whose movements seemed effortless, the person who appeared to know exactly what to do. Now you understand that there was never any magic, only years, years of mistakes, years of learning, years of paying attention. The calm confidence you admired was not something a person was born with. It was something created slowly through experience. During another journey, you find yourself traveling along roads that once seemed unfamiliar. Now they feel almost like old friends. The same hills appear. The same rivers cross your path. The same inns offer shelter. Yet the experience is different. When you were younger, you saw only distance. Now you see details. You notice the condition of the road, the quality of the fields, the signs of approaching weather, the expressions of people you meet. The journey has not changed. You have. A younger traveler may look toward the destination. You find yourself paying attention to the miles between, because the miles contain most of life. The conversations beside the road, the quiet meals, the moments waiting for a crossing, the evenings when everyone settles near a small fire. These are the memories that remain. The destination is important, but the journey creates the person who arrives there. This understanding changes the way you approach trade. You no longer measure success only by profit. Profit matters. A merchant cannot ignore it, but it is only one measurement. A successful journey is also one completed safely. A successful season is also one where relationships remain strong. A successful business is also one that can continue after difficulty. A successful life is one where work, responsibility, and human connection remain balanced. These ideas are rarely written in official records. History often remembers rulers, battles, buildings, large events. But beneath those things existed countless people maintaining ordinary systems. Merchants, farmers, craftsmen, travelers, people whose names disappeared but whose actions kept communities functioning. The merchant's life is part of this hidden history. It is not a story of conquest. It is not a story of dramatic transformation. It is a story of connection, a piece of cloth carried from one place to another, a tool delivered to someone who needed it, a message passed between communities, a promise kept over many years, small movements, small exchanges, yet together they create something much larger. As evening arrives, you return to the shop. The same door closes, the same lock turns, the same shelves stand quietly in the dim light. The day is finished. Outside, the town becomes still. Inside, the goods wait for tomorrow. Perhaps a customer will arrive looking for something specific. Perhaps a traveler will bring news from another region. Perhaps another journey will soon begin. The future remains uncertain. It always has. But uncertainty no longer feels uncomfortable. It feels familiar. The merchant has spent a lifetime living alongside it, and perhaps this is the quiet lesson hidden within this old way of life. A person does not need complete control over the future to live meaningfully. They need attention. They need patience. They need the willingness to continue doing small things carefully, because a life is not usually changed by one enormous decision. It is shaped by thousands of small choices repeated over years. The way a person treats a customer, the way they prepare for a journey, the way they repair what is broken, the way they teach someone younger, the way they continue even when progress feels slow. These choices disappear quickly from memory, but they form the structure of everything that follows. Long after the merchant's footsteps are gone from the street, the habits remain. The shop may belong to someone else. The wagon may carry different goods. The faces in the market may change, but the rhythm continues. Open the shutters, prepare the goods, meet the customer, keep the promise, begin again tomorrow. And perhaps that is the most accurate way to understand the life of a medieval merchant, not as a constant adventure, not as a search for wealth, but as a quiet relationship with time itself. A life measured not by how quickly things were achieved, but by how carefully they were maintained. A life of roads traveled slowly, of decisions made patiently, of ordinary days that, when placed together, became something much larger. A lifetime. There is a certain kind of life that disappears quietly, not because it was unimportant, not because it lacked meaning, but because it was built from moments too ordinary to attract attention. A door opening each morning, a candle being lit before sunrise, a wooden counter being cleaned, a set of scales being carefully balanced, a wagon wheel being repaired before it could fail, a promise being remembered years after it was made. These moments rarely become the subjects of grand histories. They do not stand beside battles or royal ceremonies. They do not fill the pages written about kings and kingdoms. And yet these quiet moments were the foundation of everyday life. The medieval merchant lived within this hidden world, a world of movement and waiting, a world of uncertainty and preparation, a world where success was rarely created through one remarkable event, but through thousands of careful decisions repeated over many years. You have followed this life from the early mornings inside a small shop, through the long roads between distant towns, through crowded markets and quiet winter evenings, and perhaps the most surprising thing is how familiar it begins to feel. The merchant's world may seem distant. The clothing is different, the tools are different, the roads are different, the pace of life is different, but many of the feelings remain unchanged. The tiredness after a long day, the satisfaction of completing a difficult task, the uncertainty of planning for the future, the importance of being trusted by others, the comfort of returning to a familiar place. These things belong not only to one century, they belong to human experience. A merchant's life was not easy. The roads were long. The weather could be unforgiving. Travel required patience. Trade required careful judgment. A poor decision could affect months of work. A damaged shipment could create financial difficulty. A failed journey could change future plans. There was little protection from uncertainty, no instant communication, no quick replacement, no easy way to correct mistakes. The merchant had to live with consequences. But perhaps that is why patience became such an important part of the profession. When everything moved slowly, people learned to think slowly. They learned to prepare. They learned to wait. They learned that many problems could not be solved immediately. A bridge needed repair. A storm needed to pass. A shipment needed to arrive. A season needed to change. Time itself became something people worked with rather than something they fought against. Today, many things that once required days can happen in moments. Messages cross the world almost instantly. Goods travel through systems far larger than any medieval merchant could imagine. A person can find information with a few simple actions. Distance feels smaller. Waiting feels shorter. And yet perhaps something has been lost as well. The quiet awareness that comes from moving slowly, the understanding that every object has a journey behind it, the appreciation for preparation, the connection between effort and result. A medieval merchant could look at a piece of cloth and understand that it represented countless hands. Someone raised the sheep, someone prepared the wool, someone spun the fibers, someone dyed the material, someone carried it across roads, someone eventually placed it into the merchant's shop. The object contained time, it contained human effort, it contained distance. In many ways, the merchant's greatest skill was not selling, it was understanding connection, understanding that nothing existed alone. A customer depended on a craftsman depended on materials, a merchant depended on roads and animals and countless relationships. Trade was not simply movement of goods, it was movement of trust, and trust was always fragile. A merchant could not build it quickly. It had to be earned through repeated actions, a fair exchange, a truthful answer, a fulfilled promise, a patient conversation. Over time, these small moments became something powerful. A reputation, a name that carried meaning beyond the person who owned it. When people entered the shop, they were not only buying objects, they were buying confidence. Confidence that the merchant would treat them fairly. Confidence that the goods were what they appeared to be. Confidence that the relationship would continue beyond a single transaction. This was the invisible wealth of the medieval merchant, not stored in a chest, not counted on a table, but carried through the memories of others. And perhaps this is the part of the merchant's life that remains most recognizable, the desire to build something that lasts, not necessarily something famous, not necessarily something remembered by everyone, simply something dependable, a place, a skill, a relationship, a reputation, a contribution to the small world around you. As the evening settles over the old town, imagine the merchant's shop one final time. The shutters are closed. The candles are burning low. The shelves stand quietly in the darkness. The day's work has ended. Outside, footsteps become fewer. The market square rests. The roads become empty. Somewhere beyond the town walls, another traveler continues toward another destination. Somewhere else, another merchant counts the day's earnings. Somewhere else, another apprentice watches carefully, learning the small habits that will one day become their own. The rhythm continues. not loudly, not dramatically, simply continuing, and maybe that is the true nature of history. Not only the great moments that changed kingdoms, but the ordinary moments that allowed people to keep going, the meals prepared, the tools repaired, the goods carried, the promises kept, the mornings when people woke and returned to their responsibilities. History is often carried by those who never expected to be remembered. The medieval merchant was one of those people. A person standing between places, between producers and customers, between one season and another, between what was known and what was still uncertain. A person who spent a lifetime moving through a world that demanded patience, and perhaps after following this quiet rhythm, you can understand why such a life mattered, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was ordinary in a way that held everything together. The roads were built from countless journeys. The markets existed because countless people arrived. The town survived because countless workers continued their routines. Every civilization depends on these quiet patterns, the unseen work, the repeated effort, the small responsibilities carried from one day into the next. So as this story slowly comes to rest, there is no grand ending. The merchant's life does not close like a book. It simply fades into the larger movement of history. Another morning comes, another shop opens, another wagon begins its journey, another person carefully places one foot before the other along the road, and somewhere in that endless rhythm the same quiet lessons remain. Move patiently, prepare carefully, value trust, accept uncertainty, notice the small things, continue, because sometimes the most meaningful lives are not the ones that create the loudest memories. Sometimes they are the ones that quietly keep the world moving. The candle burns lower, the street becomes still, the old shop rests, and for a little while the merchant's world becomes quiet again.